Welcome back to another reading and correcting of a waste. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 7. Marlot dropped him off at his home, but Trembor didn't stay there long. He showered, dressed in loose pants and a well-worn shirt before driving to his parents' house for the monthly family dinner. He parked next to the other cars in the large driveway in front of their ancestral home. It no longer stood on the edge of town, on the edge of a town, having been swallowed by the ever-expanding city. And his family no longer owned the land as far as the eye could see, but they had managed to keep a substantially large lot. Trembor had only seen pictures of the forest that used to stand behind the house. His father's mom, Granny, had told stories of running in the wood, of luring prey into the trees so she could hunt like in the old stories. He missed Granny. "Hi, Dad," he said as he entered the house. He then went to the living room, and his father looked at him from the old recliner he sat in. He looked to the book he'd been reading. He closed the book he'd been reading, keeping a finger in its spot. In his spot. "Welcome home," Orem replied in his deep voice. "Where are Mom and Sis?" he asked, looking around. Then at the ceiling when he heard footsteps above. The sun was too light to be them, and wouldn't run in the house. It was the cubs playing. "They're out hunting." "Already?" Trevor checked his watch. He hadn't made as good time as he'd hoped. "I was hoping they'd wait for me. I told Mom I wanted to go with them." Fordham gave him an amused look. "I understand you have to do your own hunting since you live alone, but you shouldn't be so eager to do it. It's a female's job." He rolled his eyes. "You need to keep up with the times, Dad. It's no such thing as a female's job in this no some no such thing as a female's job in this day and age." Father," Bullerman said as he stopped next to Trembor, armful of plate, "he likes his old traditions." He was Trembor's brother via Serene. He was a head shorter than Trembor, had a long, messy red-brown mane, and currently smelled of detergent. "Traditions endure for a reason," he replied gruffly. He raised his books to cover the smile that curled. Or chuckled at their father's reaction. You need any help setting up, Bo?" he asked his brother. Bolifan shook his head, making a lock of his mane fall in front of his eyes. "No, we're good." He tried to blow the lock away without success. "Sarek and Juras are already helping." He whipped his head around, and the lock flew out of his eyes, only to fall back there. And then more hair fell in his face. He growled in an ounce and stormed to the dining room. Trevor and his father tried not to laugh. "You should deal with your own crisis before you offer to help Bo with his." Torim focused on his book. Trevor frowned. "What? I have a crisis?" "Seems a certain someone had his pad turned off this morning." Torim didn't look up from his book. Trevor frowned, then cursed himself. With Marlowe being in his bed, he'd forgotten he'd promised his niece he would listen to her tell him about the museum trip. "Sarah's going to claw me to the bone, isn't she?" Durham chuckled. "No, but if she does, you'll deserve it." Trevor headed to the kitchen with a resigned sigh. "Hey, bro," Sarek said as Trevor entered the room. He was lean with a light brown mane he kept short. Of everyone in the family, he was the one who most resembled the golden mane of their surname. "Hi, Sarek." Trevor wrinkled his nose at the intense smell of cleaners and found a new mate yet? Brother had gone through 6 mates in the last 7 years. "No, I'm taking my time. If I bring another female home only to break up with her again, that's going to think I'm like you." Poor snorted. "I can't see you in bed with another male." He eyed his brother critically. "Although, if you ever want to try, I know a pleasure house where they'd appreciate your looks." Lyric had definitely inherited their mother's, Arina's lean muscle, while Trembor had gotten their father's heavier one. "No thanks," Lyric chuckled. I like to keep my tail tucked down, thank you very much. And what do you know of pleasure houses? Aren't you going steady with that mysterious mail of yours? Yes, but that doesn't mean I'm not up to date on what's attractive in the rest of the world. He looked through the three cabinets. He looked through three cabinets before finding the tin containing what he was looking for. If Serene finds out you took from her stash, you know she's going to tell Mom, right? Trembor took a packet out of the tin before putting it back in its place. Won't mind. This is an emergency. Derek's eyes lit up in understanding. You're the reason for all the mumbling that's going on. Shooed his brother out of the kitchen. Don't waste your time talking to me. Go appease the cubs. With a bow, with a bow. Trembor did as he was told. As soon as he poked his head at the top of the stairs, one of the cubs spotted him. Trembor's home! Neril exclaimed, and he and the cubs rushed him. He saw Dara start running too, then stop. She crossed her arm over her chest and turned her back to him. Parallax also hung back. He was the oldest of the cub and considered himself too old to act like a baby. Isa was the first one to reach him, and she had her arms raised, so he picked her up. He made sure she was secured in the crook of his arm, then picked up Gensir. You're going to be a strong hunter, he told his nephew. I can barely pick you up anymore. Gensir grinned at the compliment. Trembor carried them into the room and headed for the large couch at the back. Why didn't you answer your pad? Pelonox asked, looking up at him. His mane was darker than his father's, Sirek. His father, Sirek's, but otherwise he looked a lot like him. But before Trembor could reply, Isa was pulling his lips up. Did you brush your teeth this morning? He had to wait until she was satisfied they were clean before answering. Yes, I did. He deposited her and Gensir on the couch. Now, if you all wait here quietly, I'll answer all your questions. All of them? He asked, looking at Ronick, her brother. Yes, all of them. From her guest, he was setting himself up for difficult ones. Look he received. With a series of okays, he settled down and on and around. They settled down on and around the couch. Across the space to Dara, who kept her back to him. Her ear twitched as he knelt behind her. They almost turned in his direction, but Trembor could tell she was concentrating on keeping them steady. I'm sorry, he offered. Instead, I could tell you about the museum. The 4-year-old's tail lashed about angrily. I know. I forgot. I'm sorry. He took the meat packet out of his pocket and ripped it open with a claw. I brought you a treat. Sarah's ear swiveled back at the sound, and her head slowly followed. Her nose twitched as the smell reached her. Everyone in the house knew about Serene's stash of high-quality meats, and only the huntress' fierceness kept the cubs out of it. With the fickleness of the very young only the very young could manage, she hugged him tightly, all her anger forgotten. She took the packet out of his hand. He picked her up and walked to the couch. The cubs made space so he could sit. He did, and made sure his niece was comfortable in his lap as she nibbled on them. All right, as promised, what's the first question? Why didn't you answer your pad? Raina asked. She was Dara's sister, older by 2 years. I was busy, he answered, expecting it. Expected. Expected. That one. Frowns traveled on the cub's face, and they looked at each other before Bailey picked up. But you usually answer even when you're busy. She was Gansia's sister. Were you busy with him? Alex asked. Yes. They all knew about Marlot, even if he was only as the mysterious him. Trembor didn't volunteer any detail about his relationship. The cubs had learned he wouldn't answer questions that were too. The cub's face lit up. Is he here? Isneson asked. He was Erelex's younger brother. No. Why not? Muriel asked. Because he isn't ready. Trembor looked forward to the day he could introduce Marlot to his family. But that wouldn't happen until his wolf was comfortable with others knowing how they felt about each other. What's a tail raiser? Onyx asked. The surprise made Trembor cough. Where did you hear that term? He was careful to keep disdain he felt for it out of his tone. Out of the corner of his eyes, he noticed Heralex look away, ears folded against his coat. At the academy, Johnson said Eric's dad was a tail raiser, and the other cubs laughed. Did you laugh? Trembor fixed the cub with a steady gaze. Chronic shook his head vigorously. They didn't know I was there. They don't like it when the younger cubs hang around them. Trevor closed his eyes for a moment, trying to figure out how to explain a sexual slur to a cub in a way that wouldn't get either one of them in trouble with his parents. It's a term used to hurt someone's feeling. So I want you to promise me never to use it. Bruno elbowed his brother in the side. See, I told you it was a bad word. Chronic rubbed his side and glared at her, then looked at Trembor. I promise, he said solemnly. That goes for all of you. I don't want any of you to use that term. Understood? They all nodded. Why is it an insult? Isenson asked. Leave it alone, Heralex told his brother. But I don't get it. What's wrong with raising my tail? Demonstrate, he raised his. It's a sexual insult, he said, which earned him a disgusted look from most of them. It's used to mean that a male likes other males. There's something wrong with a male liking another male? You like another male? Cialin was too young at 10 to know about sex, but she was very smart and had access to the information network. No, there's nothing wrong with it, but some people think there is, so they use that word as an insult. I still don't get it, said. That's cause there's more to it than that. His tone becoming sharp. Like what? Brother asked, a confused expression on his face. That he's like a queen. Heralex spat before storming to the other side of the room. Trevor was surprised at the use of the word. He wondered when queen became a sexual word. He had an inkling what it meant, but it was evident by his expression. Esenson knew exact. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see what happened here. There's a typo in his name. I did. Okay. This Isenson, not Isne. Isen. Okay. Learn this one. Take ones may have made again. All right, there we go. Trembor was surprised at the use of the word. He wondered when queen became a sexual. He had an inkling what it meant, but it was evident by his expression. Esenson knew exactly. He was 13, so Trembor wasn't surprised. His nephew looked away, ears turning red, and when he realized Trembor was looking at him. The other cubs looked from one another, one brother to the other, realizing something had happened, but not knowing what. Trembor got them to promise not to use that word. On to other questions. Fortunately, none of them were as delicate. After an hour of questions, most of the cubs grew bored and moved on to playing games together or individually on their pads. When the last one left the couch, Trevor stood and stretched. He had to find a way to trick one of his brothers into helping him next time. He joined Heralex. Are you okay? He asked the young male as he sat next to him. He really couldn't think of him as a cub anymore. He expected Dorim would offer him a seat at the adults' table soon. Heralex looked like he was going to give him a dismissive answer, but closed his. He was silent for a moment. When did you know you liked male? I knew for sure after I experienced my first heat, but looking back on it, I'm sure the signs were there before that. Why? The young lion shrugged. Someone called me a tail raiser at the academy. Trevor hugged his nephew. You're not one. Heralex resisted for a moment, leaning into it. Oh, in the shower after sports, I got hard. I didn't mean to, it just happened. Ears turned red before folding back in embarrassment. Trevor didn't let go of him. That's not what I mean. Even if you like males, that doesn't make you a tail raiser. Tail raisers are broken and something's missing, and the only time they feel like it isn't is when they're having sex with a male. So they just lie there with their tails in the air, waiting for the next one. They both fell silent after. So they're sick? Alex asked. Yes, they are. Or remembered some he'd seen in the pleasure houses, so frequented them. The look of desperation on their face as they sought after a male to take their pain away. You must is enough, diffuse main. Don't worry too much about what your body does. Until you've experienced your first heat, it's going to have a mind of its own. Just don't let anyone pressure you into anything, not a male, female, or even your own body. You have plenty of time to figure out who your heart wants to play with. Felix growled in annoyance. Unlike his father, he always kept his brushed and trimmed. Trembor chuckled and used the distraction to make the young lion to take the young lion's pad out of his jacket. He added some information to the entry for his note. Erelex made sure his mane was back in place before taking his pad back. What's that? He asked, looking at the entry. That's the code that lets you bypass the family lock I put on my pad when I'm working. Only use it if it's important. Okay? Erelex nodded in awe at the privilege he'd received. The cubs ran off at the sound of the adult female's voice entering the house. Trembor smiled at their exuberance. When he reached it, the large entryway was crowded with his mothers and sisters, as well as the cubs swarming around them, asking questions about the hunt. Two of his mothers, Irina and Serene, and sisters, Eileen and Dania, had kills over their shoulders: antelope, an elk, a bull, and a horse. The four of them tried to keep the balance while avoiding stepping on the young ones. Trembor made his way through the throng to take Irina's kill off her. His father took Serene's with a kiss to her, and Sarek to Zelin and Bolifan Dania. Females gave their thanks in the living room to get their wounds seen to by the other males. Even hunting as a group didn't keep them from getting injured, especially when going after such large prey. No one offered to help with the carcasses. One male per body was enough. They dumped them on the immaculate stone table, one to a side. It no longer saw as much use now that their children had their own places. On any other day, they got their meat processed at the local store. The family dinner was special, and preparing the meat was part of the tradition. It harkened back to older time and allowed the males to catch up on each other's lives. Terem took out the box containing the skinning knives. Wood was old and well worn. Skinning could be done with claws, but it was much more practical and faster to do it with a well-maintained knife. He handed one to each of his sons. As Eric isn't here again, I noticed. Trembor pulled the skin off the antelope's body. Zarek nodded, cutting the skin around the bull's horn. Last I heard, he and his mate's family were visiting Sorango. Shook his head in amusement. At this rate, he's going to see more of the world before he's 20 than I have in my entire life. He was an expert with the knife and had the skin of the elk before any of his children had finished. I'm in no hurry to leave the city, Oliphant stated. I have everything here, everything I need here. My children, my family, females. He grinned at that one. Speaking of females. Looked at him. Any prospect for a mate? Oliphant shook his head and cursed as a lock fell into his front of his face. He reached for it, saw the blood on his hand, and swore again. I'm in no hurry. Zarex showed me the futility of rushing things. He grinned at the pale male lion. I've learned my lesson, Zarek replied. I'm taking my time now. So, 7th time's the charm, or commented. Not to smile. Zarek snorted. Hey, at least I gave Dad a grandchild. Oh, that hurts, Trevor replied, no longer able to keep from grinning. At the rate you're going, I'm going to be mated before you are. Oh? You're willing to bet on it? Definitely. How much? Torium cleared his throat. Let's not have any gambling, shall we? Sorry, Dad, Tor and Sarek said in unison. Their mood grew somber as the comment reminded them of their father's youthful. Does that mean you'll be introducing us to him soon? Torium asked. Trembor shrugged and focused his body before him. Wish I knew. His upbringing was so different. Sometimes he gets hung up on the smallest thing. Pause and look at his father. Just don't know. We're silent for a time. Okay. Polyform said before this silence drags us into unbearable depression. I'm changing the subject. The Survivor experiment. Any of you caught up any of you caught the latest episode? Did you see how quickly Jurgen took down that sheep? It's like it never saw him coming. Yeah, Thorek set the skin aside. Lyra, their third mother, would tan it before selling it. I have to say, I'm surprised it took one of them so long to do it. He cut the bull's bellies open, and blood spilled out over the table. The rich smelling liquid flowed into the grooves at the edge, which channeled it to the hole at the corner to be collected in. I would have gone after the rabbit on the first day. Talk about an easy prey. I expected them to try harder to stick to the rules. Trembor cut the stomach out of the body and placed it on a large tray at the center of the table. He then started on cutting the meat away from the bones. Are you serious? Asked. Nodded. You can only go so hungry for so long, Bolifant said, before you do something about it. We're not made to survive off the grain. Sure, we have to eat some of it, but if you only eat that, we get sick. Derek nodded in his agreement. The look on Malik's face when that rabbit brought him those fish he caught and suggested he eat them? Priceless. Trevor nodded. Everyone knew fish were vermin. Now, him actually trying to eat one and throwing up, Turim said that was priceless. His son stared at him. Laughed. Don't be so surprised. I watched the vids too. Went back to cutting the meat into manageable portion. Was almost done with his prey. I'm not that old. The dining room resounded with conversation. The adults sat around the long table while the cubs were spread out 3 smaller tables. Turim sat at one end, smiling as he looked at his mates seated at the other end, and then at their children between them. The meat was laid out on the table with plates of vegetables scattered among them. The platter with the stomach was in front of Serene, Arena, and Lyria. As patriarch, Turim could claim the best part of the kill, but he always gave that to him. Back when he was a cub, Trembor had asked him why he did that, but had explained it was how he honored them. Turim stood, and silence fell over the room. It didn't fall quickly. Some of the cubs had to be reminded by their parents to be silent. He raised his glass, and everyone raised theirs with him. They were filled with blood, the adults cut with varying level of alcohol, depending on taste, while the cubs was clean. To those who can't be with us anymore, nodded to Bolifan, Fina, and Vexore, giving them a moment to remember the deceased mate. To our females, he continued, who brought us a feast, who ensured the survival of our name, and remind us what life is about. To our females, joined in, even the cubs. Darab waited until everyone had taken the traditional first swallow of their drink. Before my loves distribute their share, I'd like to make an offer. He paused and looked over his family. Parallax, if you want to, you are welcome to join us at our table. The young male's jaw dropped. The other cubs looked at him with admiration, while the adults kept their face. Turim hadn't commanded, he had offered. The choice was Heralex. Trevor remembered when he'd received the same offer, made by his grandfather. He'd been so proud, nervous, and afraid. To be offered a seat at the adults' table meant that even if you were still a cub in the eyes of the law, the family recognized you as an adult, with all the privilege and duty entailed. If he accepted, Heralex wouldn't spend the time before playing with the other cubs anymore. He would be expected to help prepare the meal. Soon, the female would bring him Soon, the females would bring him on hunts. He couldn't kill yet, but he was old enough to learn and prepare himself for his first kill. Heralex looked at the cubs seated around the table. The youngest one had confused expression. They couldn't understand his hesitation. Being able to sit at the adults' table was what they all aspired to. He looked at Sealan, and she nodded. With that, he stood. Bolifan got out of his seat and offered it to his son. Everyone on that side of the table shifted to make more space. Trimmer smiled to himself. He shifted to help lengthen the table before next month's family dinner. With everyone seated again, Torim raised his glasses to his mate. Loves, he simply said, and sat. The 3 females cut the stomach, portions among the. There was quiet rejoicing at the tables. Parallax looked at them with envy, was sure to surprise when he also got a portion. Cherish it, his father whispered, as he ruffled Erelix's mane. Erelix's eyes were still wide, and he didn't react to having his mane out of place. The last time you'll get to enjoy it until you're able to hunt on your own. Oliphant added a splash of alcohol to it. Once the cubs were served, Serene indicated everyone else could start eating. The conversation restarted, accompanied with a cling of utensil on plate, moans of delight, laughter. This concludes Chapter 7 of A Wasteful. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. Want to read the book as well as the rest of the series are available on all major e-retailer. If you want to support me, it's on my Patreon when you get access to just about everything else I've written. If you want to listen to me do these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes. With that, I shall wish you a good day.